Wolves do not attack stone. This is not a fact that most people in 1887 had reason to know, because most people in 1887 kept their livestock in wooden barns with wooden doors and wooden walls that a determined pack could scratch through, dig under, or simply wait beside until hunger or thirst forced the animals out. Wood is a barrier that wolves respect only as long as the barrier holds, and wooden barriers fail. Hinges rust, boards rot, latches freeze, and the patience of a wolf pack in winter is longer than the patience of any lock or latch that a farmer can afford. But stone does not rot. Stone does not rust. Stone does not give when a wolf pushes against it, and the sound of claws on stone is the sound of a predator discovering that it has met a material older than its hunger and harder than its teeth. May Selton learned this not from a book, but from a cliff, and the cliff taught her in the language that cliffs speak, which is the language of permanence, of ledges that do not move, of overhangs that do not collapse, of stone faces that have been watching the valley below for 10,000 years, and that will be watching it for 10,000 more, regardless of what the valley does, or what lives or dies within it. She inherited the cliff ledge on the 6th of September, 1887, along with 30 Cheviot sheep, a border collie named Patch, and the debts of her father, Harlan Selton, who had died of a heart seizure in August while driving the flock down from the summer pasture on Elk Ridge. Harlan had homesteaded the quarter section at the base of the ridge 11 years earlier, running sheep on the high pasture in summer and the valley floor in winter, and he had done well enough to build a solid cabin, clear 40 acres, and establish a reputation for producing the cleanest wool in the county, until the wolves came back. The wolves had been scarce on the ridge for years, driven out by the first wave of settlement in the 1870s, pushed into the deep timber of the high country where the elk were plentiful and the humans were not. But the elk herds had thinned by the mid-1880s, overhunted by the same settlers who had driven the wolves out. And the wolves had followed the food downhill, returning to the ridges and valleys they had been pushed from a decade earlier. By the summer of 1887, there were 3 packs working the ridges above the valley, 20 to 25 animals in total, and they were killing sheep with the methodical efficiency of predators who had found an undefended food source and intended to use it. Harlan lost 6 ewes in July alone, taken from the summer pasture at night while the flock grazed the open ridgetop, where there was no fence and no wall, and no barrier between the sheep and the dark timber where the wolves waited. May was 22 years old, the only child, unmarried, and now the sole owner of a sheep operation that was being eaten alive. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall, with sandy brown hair that she wore in a thick plait down her back, gray-green eyes, a weathered face with sun lines at the corners of her eyes from years of squinting into mountain light, wide shoulders for a woman, and hands that were rough and cracked from lanolin and rope, and the particular abrasion that comes from handling wool in all weather. She wore canvas trousers, not a dress because dresses are useless on a mountainside, a flannel shirt, a sheepskin vest, leather boots to mid-calf, and a wide-brimmed felt hat that had been her father's, and that she wore without sentiment because it fit and because the sun did not care whose hat it was. She had 3 options: sell the sheep, move the sheep to the valley floor where they would be closer to help but farther from the summer pasture that sustained them, or find a way to protect them on the ridge where the grass was good and the water was reliable, and the only problem was the wolves. She chose the cliff. The cliff had been part of Harlan's homestead since the original filing, a section of Elk Ridge's south face that no one valued because you cannot plow a cliff and you cannot graze a cliff face, and the only thing a vertical wall of sandstone produces is shadow and the occasional rockfall. But May had climbed the cliff as a child, exploring the ledges and overhangs with Patch's predecessor, a collie named Belle. And she knew the south face ledge the way a person knows a place they discovered young and remembered forever. If you want to know what a shepherd's daughter built on a cliff ledge that kept 30 sheep alive when every other flock on the ridge was taken, subscribe to The Warm Floor and tell us in the comments where you are watching from today. The ledge was on the south face of Elk Ridge, 400 feet above the valley floor, a natural shelf of sandstone 50 feet long and 12 feet deep, backed by a vertical cliff face that rose another 100 feet above the ledge to the ridgetop. The ledge was accessible from below by a single trail that switchbacked up the south face, a path narrow enough for sheep and humans, but too steep and exposed for comfortable wolf travel. From above, the cliff face dropped vertically to the ledge. No wolf could descend it without falling. The ledge itself was flat, dry, and sheltered from the north wind by the cliff face behind it, and from rain by a natural overhang that extended 6 feet out from the cliff above, creating a covered area along the back of the ledge that stayed dry in all but the most wind-driven storms. The ledge was a natural pen. 3 sides were protected: the cliff face behind, the cliff drop in front, and the cliff face continuing on the east end where the ledge narrowed to nothing. Only the west end was open, where the trail from below reached the ledge surface, and this was the entrance that May needed to close. She built a wall. Not a fence, a wall. She gathered sandstone from the talus slope below the cliff, carrying it up the switchback trail on her back, and on a wooden pack frame that she built from lodgepole pine, load after load through September and October until the pile on the ledge was large enough to build with. Patch drove the sheep out of the way each morning and kept them on the far end of the ledge while May worked, and the sheep watched the wall rise the way sheep watch everything. With a lack of interest so complete, it approaches a philosophical position. The wall went across the west end of the ledge, 12 feet wide, the full width of the ledge from cliff face to cliff edge. It was 4 feet tall and 2 feet thick, dry stacked sandstone, with a gate opening 3 feet wide, closed by a heavy wooden gate of split pine planks that May built and hung on iron hinges she bought in town for 60 cents. The wall was not elegant. It was not pretty. It was 2 feet of stone that a wolf could not dig under, because the ledge was solid rock, could not climb over, because 4 feet of loose stacked stone provides no foothold and shifts under weight, and could not go around because the cliff dropped 400 feet on one side and rose 100 feet on the other. The cost of the wall was 60 cents, the price of the hinges. The stone was free, gathered from the mountain. The wall could not be tunneled because beneath it was the ledge itself, a continuous slab of sandstone that had been there since the Devonian, and that was not going to be excavated by any animal that lacked a pickaxe and a geological timescale. May reinforced the gate with a second layer of planks nailed crosswise to the first, creating a door 3 inches thick that flexed but did not break, and she drove iron nails through the outer face with the points protruding 1/4 inch. Not enough to wound, but enough to discourage the muzzle pressing that wolves use to test barriers. The gate was the only wooden element in the entire enclosure, and she treated it as the weak point, inspecting it every morning for scratch marks and pressure damage, and replacing any plank that showed signs of giving. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to The Warm Floor, because stories like these deserve to be remembered. She moved the sheep onto the ledge in early November, driving them up the switchback trail with Patch working the rear, the 30 Cheviots filing through the gate onto the sandstone shelf that would be their home until spring. The trail was the bottleneck, a single-file path that took 40 minutes to climb with the flock, each sheep following the one ahead with the unquestioning obedience that Cheviots display when a good dog is behind them, and the path is narrow enough that there is only one direction to go. May made the drive in the morning when the sheep were calm and the light was good, and by noon the entire flock was on the ledge, and the gate was closed, and the wooden bar was in its brackets, and the 4-foot stone wall stood between the sheep and everything below. The ledge was large enough, 50 feet by 12 feet, provided 600 square feet, or 20 square feet per sheep, which was adequate for the breed and more than adequate for survival. The overhang along the back wall created a covered area 8 feet deep and 50 feet long, where the sheep sheltered during rain and snow, their wool keeping them warm, while the cliff face behind blocked the wind and the overhang above kept them dry. She built a hay rack along the back wall beneath the overhang, stocked with hay she had cut from the valley meadow and hauled up the trail in bundles through October. 60 bundles, each weighing 40 pounds, carried on the pack frame up the switchback, 1 trip per day for 60 days. She placed water troughs at both ends of the ledge, filled from a spring seep that trickled down the cliff face 20 feet east of the ledge, a thin but constant flow that she channeled into the troughs with a half pipe of split pine. The sheep had food, water, shelter from the wind and rain, and a view of the valley below that they did not appreciate because sheep do not appreciate views. The daily routine was simple. Open the gate at dawn. Let the sheep graze the trailside slope for 4 hours under Patch's watch. Bring them back before dusk. Close the gate, bar it, build the fire. The grazing supplemented the hay and kept the sheep exercised and the ledge clean, and Patch, who was 12 years old and had been working sheep since he was 6 months, and who knew more about flock management than most humans in the valley, handled the grazing with the calm authority of a professional who does not need supervision. May built her own shelter at the east end of the ledge, a lean-to against the cliff face, roofed with pine poles and canvas, walled on 3 sides with dry-stacked stone to waist height, open on the south side facing the ledge and the valley below. She built a small hearth of flat stones against the cliff face, the smoke rising along the warm rock and dispersing above the overhang. The cliff face behind the hearth absorbed the fire's heat and radiated it back into the lean-to through the night, the same thermal mass principle that had warmed Margot's cob walls and Nell's cistern dome and Josie's charcoal kiln, but here serving a different purpose. Not survival against cold, but survival against wolves, because May needed to be on the ledge with the sheep, and being on the ledge meant living on the ledge, and living on the ledge meant heat and shelter, and a fire that burned against a stone wall that held the warmth until morning. The wolves came on the 19th of November. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It is free, takes a second, and helps the warm floor reach more people who need to hear it. Now back to the story. May heard them before she saw them, the howl rising from the timber below the ridge at dusk, a sound that carries for miles in cold air, and that every shepherd on every continent recognizes as the sound of a predator announcing that it is awake and hungry and beginning to work. Patch heard it too and pressed against May's leg and stared into the darkness below the ledge with the focused intensity of a dog that knows exactly what that sound means and exactly what its job is. The pack, 7 wolves, led by a large gray female that May would later call the matriarch, came up the South Face Trail in the dark, moving in single file the way wolves move on trails, silent except for the click of claws on stone. May watched them from the ledge by the light of her fire. 7 shapes moving up the switchback, gray and black against the darker gray of the mountainside, their eyes catching the firelight in pairs of yellow-green points that appeared and disappeared as the trail turned. They reached the wall at midnight. The matriarch came first, stopping at the base of the 4-foot stone wall and testing it. Nose to the stone, paws on the surface, a tentative push that found no give, no flex, no weakness. The wall did not move. The wall did not creak or shift or groan the way a wooden fence groans when weight is applied. The wall was stone on stone on stone, and when the matriarch pushed, the stone pushed back with the indifference of a material that has no opinion about wolves. She tried the gate. The split pine planks were solid, 2 inches thick, barred from inside with the wooden beam in its iron brackets. She scratched at the base and found rock. The ledge surface, continuous sandstone with no soil to dig through. She circled to the cliff edge and looked along the face for a way around. And there was no way around because the ledge dropped 400 feet to the valley floor, and wolves cannot fly. The pack sat below the wall for 4 hours. They howled. They paced. They scratched at the stone and the gate and the cliff edge, and at 3 in the morning they left, filing back down the switchback trail the way they had come, and the sheep, who had pressed against the back wall beneath the overhang during the siege, returned to the hayrack and ate with the calm of animals that had been frightened and were now not frightened and had already forgotten why. They came back 3 nights later, and again a week after that, and twice more in December, always at night, always in the same formation, the matriarch leading, the pack following, the approach silent until they reached the wall and found it unchanged and unchangeable. Each visit was shorter than the last. The first siege lasted 4 hours. The second lasted 2. By the 4th visit, in late December, the pack reached the wall, tested it briefly, and left within 40 minutes. They were learning. Wolves are intelligent enough to abandon a failed strategy, and the stone wall was a strategy-ending fact, a material argument that admitted no rebuttal. May watched every visit from her lean-to, the fire burning low, Patch pressed against her side, the sheep huddled at the back of the ledge beneath the overhang. She did not sleep well during wolf season, no shepherd does, but she slept better than the valley farmers below because the valley farmers lay in their beds listening to howls and wondering whether tonight was the night the wolves found the loose board or the warped door or the rotted post, and May lay on her ledge knowing that between her sheep and the wolves was 4 feet of stone that did not have loose boards or warped doors or rotted posts, that simply sat there, 2 feet thick and 3,000 pounds heavy, and waited for the wolves to lose interest. The valley losses mounted through the winter. Caleb Underwood's pole corral was the worst. The wolves found the loose corner in November and returned to it 3 more times, taking 11 sheep by February. Caleb repaired the corner each time with new rails and wire, and each time the wolves found a new weakness, a different corner, a gate that didn't latch, a rail that split in the cold. Wood fails in sequence, fix one point, and the stress transfers to the next weakest, and the wolves were patient enough to find each one. Emmett Briggs lost his sheep through the barn door. The November damp warped the frame, and opened a gap at the bottom that grew from 4 inches to 8 over the course of the winter. The wolves waited until the gap was large enough and went in. Emmett found the evidence in the morning. Wool on the door frame, blood on the barn floor. 4 animals gone through a gap he had noticed but not fixed, because fixing a door in November seemed like a spring job. Caleb Underwood rode up the switchback trail in February after his 5th loss of the season and stood on the ledge and looked at the stone wall and the 30 healthy Cheviots eating hay beneath the overhang, and Patch lying beside the gate with one eye open, and May sitting at her lean-to hearth mending a wool shirt. And he said what every man says when the answer is simple, and the fact that he did not think of it himself is the part that takes the longest to accept. "You moved them onto a cliff," Caleb said. "I moved them onto stone," May said. "The cliff was already here." Caleb built a stone pen that spring, not on a cliff, but on his valley property, replacing the pole corral with a dry stacked wall 4 feet tall and 2 feet thick, the same dimensions May had used, adapted for flat ground. Emmett Briggs did the same. By the autumn of 1888, 5 families in the valley had replaced wooden livestock fences with stone walls, and the wolf losses for the following winter dropped from 47 to 3. 3 sheep taken from the 2 holdouts, who still used wooden enclosures. 3 sheep that proved the rule by being the exception to it. May lived on the ledge for 3 winters. She moved the flock down to the valley floor each spring for lambing and shearing, and moved them back up in autumn when the wolves returned from the high country. The ledge was never breached. The wall was never moved. The stone held because stone holds, and the wolves, intelligent, adaptable, patient, eventually stopped trying the trail to the ledge because intelligent animals do not waste energy on problems that cannot be solved. And 4 feet of dry stacked sandstone on a cliff ledge with no soil to dig and no gap to squeeze and no wood to break was a problem that could not be solved. Settle back, listen carefully, and journey with us through the legends, hard truths, and enduring wisdom of the American frontier. Subscribe to The Warm Floor. The fire is warm, the night is still, and the frontier has much to teach.